A sudden scream split the night like shattered glass, tearing through the quiet street. Neighbors peeked through their windows, startled from their sleep, but the source was unmistakable. The old two-story house at the corner, the one with peeling paint and a front porch that creaked in the wind. Inside, the hall light flickered as if the electricity itself was trembling from fear. A young boy, no more than 12, stood frozen near the staircase, his hands shaking, his voice caught in his throat. He had been the one to scream. His wide eyes were locked on the figure at the end of the corridor. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a shadow. It was worse. Blood dripped steadily from his father's hand, splattering against the polished wooden floor. The man stood there, chest heaving, holding the kitchen knife like it weighed 100 pounds. His shirt was stained with red, not from battle, not from any war fought outside, but from something that had just happened inside these walls. The boy's mother rushed in from the bedroom, her footsteps pounding. She stopped abruptly when she saw the scene, her face pale and trembling. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft tap of blood hitting the floor, each drop louder than the last in the suffocating silence. "Wah, what happened?" her voice cracked. The father didn't answer. His eyes darted toward the living room, where the curtains swayed slightly from a breeze sneaking through the half-open window. Then came another sound, a weak groan. The mother's heart sank. Someone else was in the room. She stepped forward slowly, her bare feet sticking slightly to the blood-smeared floor. In the dim light, she saw a shadow slumped against the couch. Her older son, 17, was sitting there, clutching his stomach, his face twisted in pain. Blood oozed between his fingers. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling, tears already forming. The father finally spoke, his voice hoarse. He tried to attack me. He had the knife first." The boy on the couch shook his head weakly, his eyes glassy, his voice barely a whisper. "No, that's not true." The youngest boy pressed himself against the wall, his chest rising and falling rapidly, unsure which parent to run to, which truth to believe. Outside, the neighbors had started gathering, whispers floating through the night air. A few had phones in their hands, debating whether to call the police. The mother dropped to her knees, trying to stop the bleeding, her hands trembling as she pressed on the wound. Her mind was spinning. There was no war outside. No soldiers. No enemies. And yet, her home was a battlefield drenched in blood. The scream that had pierced the night was only the beginning. The house that once held the warmth of laughter was now heavy with tension, a silence that only came after too many words left unspoken. The brothers had been avoiding each other for weeks, moving through the halls like strangers, eyes sharp, breaths uneven. Old grudges that had been buried for years were clawing their way back to the surface. It started with little things, broken trust, stolen money, harsh words tossed in anger, but now it had grown into something darker. The younger brother, Kamal, had always felt overshadowed by his elder brother, Rafiq. Rafiq was the favorite, strong, confident, the one their father trusted with the family business. Kamal, on the other hand, was the shadow, always trying to prove himself, always failing to meet expectations. Tonight, the storm broke. Their father had gone to sleep early, unaware that the living room would soon become a battlefield. Kamal had been sitting at the dining table, hands clenched, staring at his phone, a message from a loan shark flashing across the screen. He had borrowed money behind the family's back, and now the deadline had passed. He was desperate, and his desperation had teeth. When Rafiq walked in, his voice carried the same authority that had always grated on Kamal. "You think I don't know what you've done," he said, tossing an envelope onto the table. "They came to the shop today. They said you owe them. Do you know what that does to our name?" Kamal's jaw tightened. He rose from his chair slowly, the tension in his body coiled like a spring. "Our name," he spat. "It's always your name. Everything in this house belongs to you, doesn't it? Even my mistakes are about you." Rafiq didn't flinch. He stepped closer, his broad shoulders casting a shadow over his younger brother. I've been cleaning up after you for years. But this time, you've brought danger into our home. Kamal's hands trembled, but not from fear. From rage. He could feel the years of humiliation burning in his chest. I'm not a child anymore, he hissed. Stop treating me like one. The argument escalated, voices rising, furniture scraping across the floor. The mother peeked from the hallway, her face pale, torn between intervening and staying out of the storm. And then, in the heat of anger, Rafiq shoved Kamal back. It wasn't meant to hurt, just to make a point, but Kamal's pride was a fragile thing. His hand reached for the kitchen counter, where the cold steel of a knife waited like a silent witness. The room froze for a moment. Two brothers, standing inches apart, hearts pounding. One with a lifetime of resentment in his grip. The other with a mix of anger and fear tightening his throat. And then, the first drop of blood fell. The house was dim except for the weak glow of a single bulb in the hallway, casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. The mother stood just beyond the living room doorway, her hand gripping the edge of the frame so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her heart pounded against her ribs, the sound louder than the muffled arguments that had filled the house for weeks. She had heard it all, every bitter word, every accusation, every reminder of old wounds that never truly healed. Tonight, those words had sharpened into weapons. Her elder son, Rafiq, staggered back, one hand pressed to his side where the knife had cut deep. Blood seeped through his fingers, warm and sticky, leaving a trail down his arm. Her younger son, Kamal, stood frozen, the knife still trembling in his grip. His face was pale, his lips quivering, but his eyes burned with something between guilt and defiance. The mother's first instinct was to scream, to rush forward, to stop the nightmare unfolding before her. But her voice caught in her throat. Fear wrapped itself around her like chains. Fear of what the neighbors would say. Fear of the police. Fear that her family, the one she had tried so hard to keep together, was already shattered beyond repair. Her gaze darted to the staircase, where her youngest child clutched the railing, eyes wide, tears streaming down his face. He looked at her as if begging for her to do something, to make it all go away. But she couldn't move. The living room smelled of iron and sweat, of rage and regret. Rafiq slumped onto the couch, his breath ragged, his voice a whisper. Mother, help me. Kamal took a step back, the knife clattering to the floor. His chest rose and fell rapidly as if he'd just realized what he had done. I didn't mean, his voice cracked, lost in the heavy silence of the room. The mother finally moved, her legs shaky as she approached her bleeding son. She knelt beside him, pressing her hands to the wound, feeling the hot blood soak her palms. Her tears fell silently, mixing with the blood on the floor. She wanted to yell at Kamal, to call for help, to beg Rafiq to hold on, but she didn't. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. Because deep down, a part of her already knew that no one could save this family now. Outside, the faint hum of the neighborhood carried on. A dog barked in the distance. The world was unaware that inside this house, a war had been fought, not with soldiers or guns, but with betrayal, anger, and blood. The mother remained a silent witness, trapped between love and horror, between the instinct to protect and the fear of losing everything. And as she held her son in her arms, she realized the scream that had started this night was only the beginning. The first drop of blood hit the marble floor with a soft tap, almost too quiet to notice, yet in that moment it was louder than thunder. It spread in a small circle, dark and glistening under the flickering light, marking the exact second their lives changed forever. Rafiq's hand trembled as he staggered back, his palm pressed to his side, warm blood seeping through his fingers. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, the pounding echoing against the walls of the living room. For a moment, he couldn't comprehend what had happened, how an argument between brothers had crossed the invisible line and turned into something irreversible. Kamal stood frozen, the knife still in his grip, his face pale and slick with sweat. His chest rose and fell rapidly as if the air had grown too heavy to breathe. His mind screamed that it was an accident, that he hadn't meant to drive the blade that deep, but the red spreading across the floor told another story. The mother's eyes were glued to that first drop of blood. It was the proof of everything she had feared for years, the buried resentments, the silent competitions, the whispered curses behind closed doors. She had tried to hold the family together with love, with patience, with endless sacrifices, but one small drop of blood showed her it had all slipped through her fingers. Rafik stumbled to the couch, leaving a trail behind him. Every step he took left a new mark on the once polished floor, as if the house itself was recording the crime. Kamal muttered under his breath, voice shaking, I didn't mean to. The youngest brother crept down a step from the staircase, his small hands gripping the railing, eyes wide with terror. He had never seen blood like this before, not from a scraped knee or a kitchen cut. This was different. This was family breaking apart in front of his eyes. The mother finally moved, kneeling beside Rafik, pressing her trembling hands against the wound to slow the bleeding. Stay with me, she whispered, though her voice cracked with hopelessness. She didn't even know if she should call for help yet, or if doing so would destroy what little was left of their family name. Another drop of blood fell, then another. The soft taps echoed in the silence. It wasn't a scream or a gunshot that ended the peace of this house. It was that first drop of blood, carrying with it the weight of years of resentment, betrayal, and pain. Outside, the night continued as if nothing had happened, but inside the house, time had stopped. The first drop of blood was the point of no return. The house felt like it was holding its breath. Rafik lay slumped on the couch, his breathing shallow, the mother pressing a blood-soaked towel against his wound. Kamal paced in circles, his hands shaking, muttering under his breath as though he could undo what had just happened. The youngest boy, still frozen on the stairs, didn't dare make a sound. Then a sound broke through the suffocating silence, a faint thud from upstairs. It wasn't loud, but in that tense moment, it was like a drumbeat echoing through the walls. All eyes darted toward the ceiling. The mother's voice was a trembling whisper. What was that? Kamal stiffened. He knew that sound. It came from the old storage room at the end of the hall upstairs, a room that had been locked for months. No one went in there. Or so everyone thought. A chill crawled down his spine. That room held secrets, ones he prayed would never come to light. He swallowed hard, trying to calm the racing of his heart. But the thud came again, softer this time, like a whisper saying, I'm here. The mother rose slowly, leaving Rafik groaning on the couch. Her feet moved as if pulled by some invisible force, each step creaking against the wooden floor. She reached the top of the stairs, the air colder there, the hallway dark except for a sliver of moonlight creeping through a cracked window. She stopped in front of the locked room. Her hand trembled as she reached for the old brass doorknob. It was cold, colder than it should have been. She hesitated. Behind that door could be the truth, the one that would tear apart the last threads of hope holding this family together. Kamal appeared behind her, his face pale. Don't open it, he stammered. The mother turned to him slowly, her eyes sharp despite her fear. Why, Kamal? What's in here? He couldn't answer. He didn't have to. The fear in his silence spoke louder than words. Then, as if the house itself decided for them, the door creaked open. The smell hit first, damp, metallic, and unmistakable. Blood. The room was small, cluttered with broken furniture and boxes, but in the corner was something that froze the mother where she stood, a blood-stained shirt, crumpled on the floor, and next to it, a hammer. Her breath caught in her chest. This wasn't the first night blood had been spilled in this house. She turned to Kamal, horror dawning in her eyes. What have you done? Before he could answer, Rafik groaned from downstairs, and the neighbors' murmurs outside grew louder. Someone knocked at the front door. The walls of secrets were closing in. The locked room had opened, and nothing would ever be the same again. The knock at the front door echoed through the house like a final warning. The mother froze on the stairs, her eyes darting between the blood-stained shirt in the unlocked room and the faint shadow of neighbors gathering outside the window. Downstairs, Rafik groaned, his face ashen, while Kamal stood rooted in the hallway, his chest heaving as though the walls themselves were closing in on him. "Who is it?" the mother called, her voice breaking. "It's the neighbors," a voice answered. "We heard screaming. Is everything okay?" The mother hesitated, her hand gripping the railing, while a storm of panic rose inside her. She didn't want anyone to see the blood, the chaos, the proof that their family had become its own worst enemy. But the knock came again, harder this time. Downstairs, the youngest boy finally spoke, his small voice trembling. "Mama, is Rafik going to die?" The words sliced through the air, making everyone flinch. Kamal's head snapped toward his mother. "This is your fault," he shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "You always protected him. You always treated me like I was the mistake in this house." The mother whipped her head toward him, tears burning in her eyes. "My fault? Kamal, you stabbed your brother. And now I find this," she pointed upstairs toward the blood-stained shirt, "hidden in your locked room. What else are you hiding from me?" Kamal's hands trembled. "It's not what it looks like. You don't understand. He's not innocent either." He pointed toward Rafik, who coughed weakly on the couch, struggling to lift his head. "You're lying," Rafik rasped, his voice hoarse with pain. "You've always been a coward, Kamal. You can't even take responsibility for what you've done." The mother's chest tightened as she looked between her sons, the room spinning with betrayal and fear. The family she had spent her life protecting had turned into strangers, accusing, screaming, tearing each other apart while blood soaked the living room floor. "I should call the police," she whispered, almost to herself. Kamal's face twisted in panic. "No. If you do that, everything will be ruined. You think they'll believe me? You think they won't lock me away?" He took a shaky step forward, his voice rising. "You always choose him over me. Always." The youngest boy burst into tears, hiding his face against the railing, as the mother tried to steady her shaking hands. It was no longer just blood that stained the house, it was suspicion, anger, and years of buried resentment boiling to the surface. Everyone was a suspect now. Everyone was a victim. And outside, the neighbors kept knocking, unaware that behind the wooden door, a family war raged louder than any battle ever fought in the streets. The living room smelled of iron and fear. Blood smeared across the floor like a cruel signature, and the air was thick with the weight of unspoken truths. The mother knelt beside Rafik, her hands trembling as she pressed a cloth to his wound. Kamal paced in a frantic circle, running his fingers through his hair, muttering half-formed sentences. The youngest boy had retreated to a corner, hugging his knees, rocking as if he could block out the nightmare unfolding before him. Then the mother's voice cracked the silence. "Enough," she said, her tone low but sharp, her eyes locked on Kamal. "I want the truth. All of it. Now." Kamal froze, chest heaving. His lips quivered, but the words didn't come. He glanced toward the stairs, toward the locked room that now lay open like a wound. The blood-stained shirt. The hammer. The smell that clung to the air. "I tried to protect us," he whispered, barely audible. The mother's eyes narrowed. "Protect us? From who, Kamal?" Kamal swallowed hard. Not from outsiders. From him." He pointed a trembling finger toward Rafik. He started this long before tonight." Rafik coughed, his face twisted in pain and rage. "Lies," he rasped, but the guilt flickering in his eyes told a different story. The mother's hands shook harder. "What do you mean?" Kamal's voice cracked, the dam finally breaking. "Do you remember the night the police came to our street? The neighbor's son who disappeared? Everyone thought it was a robbery gone wrong, but it wasn't." His chest heaved as the words tumbled out. "Rafik came home that night with blood on his clothes. He told me to hide them, to burn them. I didn't. I kept them in the locked room. The mother's breath caught. Her world tilted. She stared at Rafik, searching his face for denial, for innocence, but all she saw was the shadow of a truth he had buried for years. That's not how it happened, Rafik muttered weakly. He attacked me first. I was defending myself. Tears burned the mother's eyes. And you never told me? You made your brother carry this secret all this time? Kamal's voice rose, raw with pain. I was a kid. I wanted to forget, but he wouldn't let me. He made me a part of it. And now everything is falling apart because of him. The youngest boy whimpered, rocking in the corner. Stop, please stop. The mother pressed a hand to her mouth, her entire body trembling. The blood in the house wasn't just tonight's tragedy, it was the echo of years of silence, lies, and hidden sins. Their family had been rotting from the inside long before the first drop of blood ever touched the floor. Outside, the neighbors knocked again, harder this time. A distant siren wailed, creeping closer. The secrets were no longer buried. And now, there was no turning back. The wail of the approaching siren grew louder, curling through the night air like a warning. Inside the house, the mother stood frozen between her two bleeding sons, her heart pounding as the weight of all the secrets bore down on her. Then the front door creaked open. Everyone froze. It wasn't the neighbors or the police. It was someone they all knew too well, Uncle Salim, the father's younger brother, stepping in without knocking, his face partially hidden by the dim light. He had always been around, always helpful, always smiling, but tonight, his eyes were cold and calculating. What happened here?" he said, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed, as his gaze swept over the bloodstains, the trembling mother, and Rafik slumped on the couch. The mother's voice cracked. "Salim, we need help. Rafik is hurt, he needs a hospital." But Kamal's eyes sharpened with sudden clarity. "No," he hissed, stepping back. He knew. He always knew. The room seemed to hold its breath. Salim tilted his head, a faint smirk ghosting over his lips. "Careful, boy. You don't want to say something you'll regret." The memories slammed into Kamal like a flood, the late-night whispers between Rafik and Salim, the times money went missing from the shop, the night Rafik came home with blood on his shirt and Salim showed up minutes later, carrying a bag he refused to open. You set this up," Kamal said, his voice trembling with rage. "The loan sharks, the threats, you wanted us to tear each other apart." Salim's silence was the confirmation no one wanted. The mother's face crumpled in horror. "Salim, tell me he's lying." But Salim only stepped closer, his shoes leaving small red smudges on the floor. "Your sons were weak. All I did was give them a little push. And now," he gestured to the blood-soaked room, "look what they've done to themselves." Rafik tried to speak, but his voice was a rasp. "You betrayed us." Salim crouched beside him, leaning close enough that only Rafik could hear. Family is the easiest to destroy, because they always trust the wrong person. The betrayal was complete. The uncle they had let into their home, the man who had shared meals with them and laughed in their living room, had been the shadow behind their downfall all along. And as he straightened up, the sound of sirens screeched to a halt outside. Flashing blue lights painted the walls. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was about to become a chain that would bind the family in tragedy forever. The flashing blue lights bled through the windows, casting eerie shadows across the blood-streaked walls. The house felt like a cage, every heartbeat echoing louder than the sirens outside. The mother stood frozen, her hands trembling, as Salim took a slow step toward the door, ready to vanish before the truth trapped him. Then, it happened. A scream tore through the night, raw and desperate, a sound that didn't come from fear alone, but from the shattering of a soul. It was the mother. The woman who had endured the secrets, the blood, the betrayal, and the slow destruction of everything she had built. Her voice rose like a wail of mourning, spilling out the windows, crawling into the quiet streets. The neighbors jolted awake. Curtains flew open. Some ran toward the house, others reached for their phones, calling the police before realizing the police were already there. Inside, chaos erupted. Rafiq's body convulsed on the couch, his voice barely a whisper, "Mother, help me," his eyes fluttered as if he was already fading into the darkness. Kamal grabbed his brother's hand, tears spilling down his cheeks. "No, no, stay with me, I didn't mean, please, I didn't mean," his words crumbled into sobs. The youngest boy, unable to take it anymore, let out his own scream, a high, broken cry that harmonized with his mother's wail. He clung to the stair railing as if it were the only solid thing left in a collapsing world. The final scream, the one that would haunt the neighborhood forever, came when Rafiq's breathing slowed, then stopped. A horrible, suffocating silence followed, broken only by the faint drip of blood on the floor. By the time the police burst through the front door, guns raised and commands echoing, it was already too late. The family they had come to save was shattered beyond repair. The mother collapsed against the floor, her cries now hoarse whispers, rocking her son's lifeless body. Kamal was dragged back by two officers, his hands sticky with his brother's blood, screaming that it wasn't his fault. And in the corner, the youngest boy stared with wide, hollow eyes, silent now, as if his voice had been taken by the tragedy that unfolded in his own home. Outside, the neighbors whispered, horrified. They had heard the last cry of a family destroyed, but they hadn't heard the years of secrets and betrayal that had led to it. And inside the house, the war was over, but its ruins would echo forever. The flashing blue and red lights bathed the street in a grim glow as officers swarmed the house. The once quiet neighborhood was now alive with murmurs, footsteps, and the heavy clank of handcuffs. Inside, the house felt like a crime scene frozen in time, blood on the floor, a knife glinting under the ceiling light, and a family shattered beyond repair. Detective Harris, a stern man with years of experience, stepped into the living room and took one slow look around. His eyes lingered on the couch, where Rafiq's lifeless body lay under a hastily draped white sheet. The mother sat on the floor, her face streaked with tears and blood, rocking back and forth as if trying to hold on to the last piece of a world that had crumbled. Kamal sat against the wall in handcuffs, his chest heaving, his voice hoarse from shouting. "It wasn't all me, you have to believe me. He wasn't innocent." The detective crouched to meet his eyes. "Start talking." "Everything." And Kamal did. He spilled the years of secrets he had buried in his heart, the night Rafiq came home with blood on his clothes after a fight that left a neighbor's son injured, the threats from loan sharks that Salim had orchestrated, the manipulation that turned brothers into enemies. His voice shook as he confessed to hiding the bloody shirt in the locked room, to carrying the weight of his brother's sins and his own desperation until it all exploded tonight. The officers searched the house methodically. In the locked room, they found not just the blood-stained shirt and hammer, but also an old envelope of cash and a burner phone linking Salim to the loan sharks who had been pressuring Kamal. The betrayal was clear. Salim had fed the fire, knowing the brothers' rivalry would destroy them from within. The detective pieced it together slowly, his pen scratching against the notepad. There was no intruder, no outside enemy, no war that had come to their door. The blood that drenched the house came from betrayal, fear, and anger that had festered for years. The mother lifted her head, her eyes empty as the words left the detective's mouth. The enemy was never outside. It was in this house the whole time. Salim was caught trying to slip away through the back alley, his smug grin vanishing as the handcuffs snapped around his wrists. He had thought the perfect crime was to let family destroy family, but the truth had surfaced, as blood always does. By dawn, the house was silent again, but the silence was different now. It wasn't the calm of a sleeping home, it was the hollow quiet of a battlefield after the war. The neighbors watched as the body was taken away, as Kamal was led out in tears, and as the mother followed, her steps heavy with the weight of every choice, every secret, every scream that had led to this night. The blood wasn't from war. It was from home. And the home would never be the same again.